You're chasing something that doesn't exist. Every morning you wake up with this gnawing emptiness, this quiet desperation that whispers you're not happy enough, not fulfilled enough, not living the life you were promised. You've been sold a lie so perfect, so polished, that you can't even see the cage you've built around yourself. The truth is, your relentless pursuit of happiness isn't bringing you closer to joy. It's ripping you apart from the inside, and the twisted part. That's exactly how it was designed to work. Right now, in this moment, you're being manipulated by an invisible force that's older than capitalism, older than social media, older than any self-help guru who's ever told you to just think positive. This force has convinced you that happiness is a destination, a peak you haven't climbed yet, a feeling you haven't unlocked. But what if I told you that the very act of chasing happiness is what's making you miserable? Let me paint you a picture. You scroll through your phone and see someone living their best life. Beaches, perfect relationships, dream careers, endless smiles. Something inside you tightens. You tell yourself you're happy for them, but underneath there's this uncomfortable comparison. This silent measurement of your life against theirs. You've been conditioned to believe that happiness is supposed to look a certain way, feel a certain way, arrive on a certain timeline. And when it doesn't, when your life feels ordinary or difficult or just disappointingly human, you assume you're doing something wrong. You start buying things, you change your routines, you download meditation apps, read books about gratitude, follow people who've apparently figured it all out. But here's what nobody tells you. The pursuit itself is the poison. The ancient Greeks understood something we've completely forgotten. They had a word, eudaimonia, which gets mistranslated as happiness, but actually means something closer to human flourishing or a life well lived. It wasn't about feeling good all the time. It was about living in accordance with your nature, engaging deeply with what matters, accepting that life contains both pleasure and pain, joy and suffering, and that trying to eliminate one side of that equation is like trying to have a coin with only heads. The Stoics took this even further. They recognized that our suffering doesn't come from external circumstances, but from our judgment of those circumstances, from our desperate clinging to how we think things should be instead of how they actually are. But we've abandoned this wisdom. We've replaced philosophy with positive thinking, depth with dopamine hits, meaning with momentary pleasure, and the results are catastrophic. Depression rates are higher than they've ever been. Anxiety is the background noise of modern existence. We have more wealth, more comfort, more entertainment options than any generation in human history, and yet we're profoundly, devastatingly unhappy. Why? Because we've been taught to treat happiness like a product we haven't purchased yet, a state we haven't achieved, a feeling we're entitled to if we just try hard enough. Let's talk about hedonism, but not the version you think you know. When most people hear hedonism, they imagine endless parties, reckless pleasure-seeking, living for the moment with no thought for tomorrow. That's a caricature, a distortion that misses the entire philosophical foundation. Epicurus, the father of hedonistic philosophy, wasn't advocating for unrestrained indulgence. He was making a far more subtle and radical claim that pleasure, rightly understood, is the highest good, but that most of what we call pleasure actually leads to greater pain. Epicurus distinguished between different types of pleasure. There are the kinetic pleasures, the active sensations of drinking when you're thirsty, eating when you're hungry, the relief of satisfying a need. Then there are the katastatic pleasures, the stable states of being free from pain, from anxiety, from the constant churning of desire. And here's the kicker. He argued that the highest form of pleasure is actually the absence of pain, a state of tranquil contentment he called ataraxia. Not the frenzied pursuit of more, but the peaceful sufficiency of enough. Think about what that means for your life right now. Every advertisement, every social media post, every voice in your head telling you that you need more, that you should want more, that happiness is just one purchase, one achievement, one life change away. That's not wisdom. That's a trap designed to keep you perpetually dissatisfied, always reaching, never arriving. The system doesn't want you to be content. Contentment doesn't drive consumption. Peace doesn't generate profit. A person who has enough, who wants nothing more, who has found satisfaction in simplicity, is worthless to an economy built on manufactured desire. And if you've been resonating with this, maybe it's time to join the space where we go deeper every week. You know where the button is? The hidden reason your pursuit of happiness is destroying you isn't just philosophical, it's neurological. Your brain wasn't designed for constant happiness. It was designed for survival, for pattern recognition, for threat detection. The same mechanisms that kept your ancestors alive in dangerous environments now misfire in a world where the threats aren't predators, but emails, social expectations, and the overwhelming pressure to optimize every aspect of your existence. When you set happiness as your goal, you activate a hedonic treadmill. You achieve something, you feel good, then your baseline adjusts and you need something bigger, better, more intense to feel that same level of satisfaction. It's like building a tolerance to a drug. You need increasing doses to get the same effect, and eventually you're chasing a high that becomes physiologically impossible to maintain. But here's what's even more insidious. The pursuit of happiness makes you afraid of negative emotions. You start treating sadness, anger, grief, frustration as problems to be solved, obstacles to be overcome, signs that something is wrong with you. You develop this toxic positivity that denies half of human experience. You tell yourself to be grateful when you're actually exhausted. You force yourself to look on the bright side when what you really need is to sit with your pain and understand it. You weaponize mindfulness, turning it into another performance, another thing you're supposed to do correctly. Nietzsche saw this coming. He talked about the last man, this comfortable, risk-averse creature who has eliminated all suffering from life, and in doing so, has eliminated everything that makes life worth living. The last man blinks and says, "We have invented happiness." But that happiness is hollow, empty, a parody of genuine human vitality. It's the happiness of someone who has never struggled, never grown, never been broken and rebuilt themselves into something stronger. It's the happiness of livestock, not of human beings reaching toward their highest potential. Real joy, the kind that sustains you, the kind that makes life feel worth living even when it's difficult, doesn't come from the absence of suffering. It comes from meaning. It comes from engagement with something larger than yourself. It comes from relationships where you can be fully seen, where you don't have to perform happiness, where you can be human in all its messy complexity. It comes from work that matters to you, not because it pays well or impresses others, but because it aligns with your deepest values. It comes from accepting that life is both beautiful and terrible, often at the same time, and that this paradox isn't a problem to be solved, but a reality to be embraced. The philosophers who actually studied human flourishing understood this. Aristotle didn't talk about happiness as an emotion, he talked about it as an activity, something you do rather than something you feel. Eudaimonia comes from practicing virtue, from developing your character, from engaging with challenges that require you to become better than you currently are. It's not about feeling good all the time. It's about living well, and living well often means doing difficult things. Facing uncomfortable truths, growing through resistance rather than avoiding it. Consider your own life for a moment. When have you felt most alive? Was it during the times when everything was easy and comfortable? When you were maximally relaxed with no demands on your time or energy? Or was it during moments of challenge, when you were stretched beyond what you thought you could handle? When you were so engaged with something that you lost track of time? When you connected deeply with another person? When you created something, or solved a problem, or pushed through a barrier you thought was insurmountable? That feeling, that aliveness, that sense of being fully present and engaged, that's what the ancient philosophers were pointing toward. Not happiness as a feeling, but fulfillment as a way of being. But we've lost the language for this. We've collapsed everything into happiness or sadness, as if human experience could be reduced to a binary. We've forgotten that you can be simultaneously grieving and grateful, anxious and determined, uncertain and committed. We've forgotten that the deepest pleasures often come wrapped in difficulty. That meaning and comfort are frequently at odds, that growth requires discomfort. And if this is landing somewhere deep inside you, if you're recognizing patterns you've been living without examining, consider staying for the conversations we have here every week. The modern wellness industry has co-opted the language of philosophy and stripped it of everything that made it powerful. They've turned stoicism into emotional repression, mindfulness into productivity optimization, self-care into They sell you courses and apps and retreats that promise to fix your happiness problem, completely missing the point that treating happiness as a problem to be fixed is what's creating the problem in the first place. They've commodified wisdom, packaged ancient insights into bite-sized content that makes you feel momentarily inspired, but it changes nothing fundamental about how you're living. Real philosophy isn't comfortable. It's not supposed to make you feel good. It's supposed to make you think, to question the assumptions you've been building your life on, to confront the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living, and he didn't mean that as a feel-good motivational quote. He meant that most people sleepwalk through existence, following scripts written by others, pursuing goals they never chose, living according to values they never examined. And then they wonder why they feel empty despite having everything they were told would make them happy. The hedonistic paradox is this: the more directly you pursue pleasure, the more it eludes you. The more you chase happiness, the more miserable you become, because pleasure and happiness aren't destinations. They arise naturally when you're engaged with something meaningful, when you're connected to others authentically, when you're living in alignment with your values rather than in reaction to external expectations. You can't force them. You can't manufacture them. You can only create the conditions where they might emerge, and then let go of your attachment to whether they do. Epicurus actually lived this way. He withdrew from public life, not because he was antisocial, but because he recognized that most social engagement in Athens was driven by competition, status-seeking anxiety about reputation. He created a garden community where people could practice friendship, philosophical discussion, simple living. He ate bread and cheese and considered it a feast because he wasn't comparing it to what others had. He cultivated friendships based on genuine affection rather than utility. He studied philosophy not to impress anyone, but to free himself from unnecessary fears and desires. And by all accounts, he was genuinely content. Not through denying himself, but through understanding what actually contributes to human flourishing and what just looks like it should. Compare that to your life right now. How much of what you do is driven by genuine desire versus fear of judgment? How many of your goals are actually yours versus internalized expectations from parents, culture, social media? How often do you stop to ask whether the life you're building is one you actually want to live, or just one that looks good from the outside? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're diagnostic tools. If you can't answer them honestly, you're probably living someone else's life. The hidden reason your pursuit of happiness is destroying you is that it's disconnected you from yourself. You've become so focused on the destination that you've forgotten to be present for the journey. You've become so obsessed with feeling a certain way that you've stopped actually experiencing your life. You're like someone watching a movie of their own existence, constantly judging whether it's good enough, whether you're happy enough, whether this moment measures up to some imagined ideal. And if you're starting to see how deep this goes, how much of your suffering is self-created through misunderstanding what human life is actually about, then maybe you'll want to keep exploring these ideas together. Here's what nobody wants to tell you, because it doesn't sell. You might never be completely happy, and that's okay. Happiness isn't the point. Life isn't a problem with happiness as the solution. Life is this strange, beautiful, terrible, fleeting experience where you get to be conscious for a brief moment in cosmic time, where you get to love and lose, create and destroy, succeed and fail, feel everything from ecstasy to despair. And trying to engineer all of that into one sustained positive emotion isn't wisdom, it's avoidance. It's a refusal to be fully human. The Stoics had this practice called negative visualization. They would imagine losing everything they had, not to be pessimistic, but to recognize that everything is temporary. That loss is inevitable. That attachment to outcomes leads to suffering. And paradoxically, this made them appreciate what they had more deeply. When you stop taking things for granted, when you recognize that every moment could be your last with someone you love, every experience could be your final one. You stop living in this distant future where happiness supposedly awaits, and you start being present for the life you actually have. But that requires accepting impermanence. It requires accepting that you will lose everything eventually, including your own life. And that terrifies people. So they distract themselves with pursuits that promise permanence, security, lasting happiness. They build bigger houses, accumulate more wealth, chase achievements that they think will finally make them feel safe, complete, satisfied. And it never works because you can't build a permanent structure on a foundation of change. The Buddhist concept of dukkha gets translated as suffering, but it's more accurately described as unsatisfactoriness. This fundamental characteristic of existence where nothing quite lives up to our expectations, where everything we grasp eventually slips away, where even our pleasures are tinged with the knowledge that they won't last. That sounds depressing until you realize it's actually liberating. Once you stop expecting life to be different than it is, once you stop demanding that reality conform to your preferences, you can actually engage with what's here instead of always wishing for something else. This is where hedonism and stoicism actually converge, despite seeming like opposites. Both philosophies are about understanding what's actually within your control and focusing your energy there. Epicurus said, "Don't fear death, don't fear gods. Pain is temporary and manageable. And pleasure is easy to obtain if you understand what you actually need." The Stoics said distinguish between what you can control, your thoughts, actions, responses, and what you can, everything else. Both are saying stop wasting your life fighting against reality. Stop creating unnecessary suffering through misunderstanding. Most of your suffering right now isn't from your circumstances. It's from your resistance to your circumstances. It's from the story you're telling yourself about how things should be different, how you should feel different, how your life should look different. And that story is killing you because it prevents you from being present with what actually is. It keeps you trapped in this exhausting cycle of judgment, comparison, striving, disappointment. What would happen if you not stopped trying, not stopped caring, but stopped the relentless pursuit of happiness as if it were something separate from the life you're already living? What if you recognized that this moment, exactly as it is, with all its imperfections and difficulties and ordinariness, is your life? Not a practice run, not a waiting room before the real thing begins, but the actual substance of your existence. Would that change how you engage with it? And if these questions are shaking something loose inside you, if you're recognizing that you've been fighting a battle you can't win, stay close to these conversations. The great tragedy of modern life is that we've been given every tool for comfort and almost no wisdom for living. We can control our environment, extend our lifespans, access infinite information, but we have no idea what to do with consciousness itself. We treat our inner lives like machines that need optimization, problems that need solving, rather than recognizing that consciousness is the one thing that can't be fixed because it isn't broken, it just is. And learning to be with what is, without constantly trying to change it into something else, is perhaps the most radical act available to you. This isn't resignation. This isn't giving up on growth or change or improving your circumstances. It's recognizing that genuine transformation comes from acceptance, not resistance. When you stop fighting against yourself, when you stop treating your natural human responses as problems, when you stop demanding that life be other than it is, you create space for actual change. Not the forced, willpower-driven change that never lasts, but the organic evolution that happens when you're finally present enough to see clearly what's actually needed. The pursuit of happiness keeps you trapped in the future. It tells you that joy is waiting somewhere ahead, just beyond the next achievement, the next milestone, the next transformation. But the future never arrives. There's only ever this moment, and then this one, and then this one. And if you're not capable of finding some measure of peace, some engagement, some presence in this moment, you never will be. Because the conditions will never be perfect. There will always be something wrong, something missing, something that needs to be fixed before you can finally relax and be happy. Epicurus understood this. He said that if you're not satisfied with what you have, you won't be satisfied with more. The person who isn't grateful for simple bread will not be made happy by a feast, because the problem isn't external. It's the restless, insatiable quality of desire itself, always reaching for the next thing, never resting in sufficiency. And you can either spend your whole life feeding that beast, or you can recognize it for what it is and stop giving it power over you. This is why real hedonism, properly understood, is actually about restraint. It's about understanding that most pleasures come with hidden costs, that the thrill of acquisition fades quickly, that chasing intensity leads to numbness, It's about choosing pleasures wisely, cultivating appreciation, recognizing that simple things deeply enjoyed bring more satisfaction than constant novelty barely noticed. It's about the pleasure of friendship over the thrill of conquest, the joy of learning over the excitement of entertainment, the satisfaction of creating over the distraction of consuming. But you've been trained to want more, bigger, better, faster. You've been trained to believe that satisfaction is a moving target, that enough is never quite enough, that there's always another level to reach. And this training serves someone, but it isn't you. It serves an economic system that requires constant growth, constant consumption, constant dissatisfaction. A person who is content is dangerous to that system. A person who has enough and knows it can't be manipulated through manufactured desire. So the question becomes, are you willing to step off the treadmill? Are you willing to examine the assumptions you've been operating under and recognize that most of them aren't yours? Are you willing to face the possibility that you've been chasing something that doesn't exist while missing what's actually here? Because that's terrifying. It means accepting that you might have wasted years pursuing the wrong things. It means confronting the reality that nobody's coming to save you, that there's no secret you haven't learned, that the life you have right now is the only one you're going to get. But it's also liberating, because once you stop waiting for happiness to arrive, once you stop treating this moment as insufficient, you can actually begin to live. Not perfectly, not without pain or difficulty, but authentically, as yourself. In this life, right now, and that's not a consolation prize. That's everything. The philosophers who figured this out thousands of years ago aren't revered because they discovered how to be happy all the time. They're revered because they learned how to live well in a world that includes suffering, how to find meaning in difficulty, how to engage fully with existence even knowing it's temporary and often painful. They developed practices and perspectives that allowed them to face reality without flinching, to accept what is without demanding it be otherwise, to find joy not in the absence of pain but in the richness of full human experience. You have access to that same wisdom, not through buying something or achieving something or becoming someone different, but through seeing clearly what's actually happening in your life and in your mind, through recognizing the patterns that create suffering and choosing differently, through cultivating the capacity to be present with whatever arises without immediately judging it as good or bad, wanted or unwanted, through building your life around what actually matters to you rather than what you've been told should matter. The pursuit of happiness is destroying you because it's based on a fundamental misunderstanding about what human beings are and what we need to flourish. We're not pleasure-seeking machines that malfunction when we feel bad. We're meaning-making creatures who need purpose, connection, challenge, growth. We need to struggle with things that matter. We need to love despite the certainty of loss. We need to create even though everything we make will eventually be destroyed. We need to engage fully with this temporary, uncertain, often difficult existence, not because it leads to happiness, but because that's what it means to be alive. And maybe that's the real secret nobody wants to tell you. Life isn't supposed to make you happy. It's supposed to make you human. Fully, completely, undeniably human, with all the beauty and terror that entails. And once you stop resisting that, once you stop demanding that existence be something other than what it is, you might discover something far more valuable than happiness. You might discover meaning, purpose, depth, the capacity to be present for your own life instead of always wishing you were somewhere else, someone else, feeling something else. That's what the philosophers were pointing toward all along. Not a formula for constant happiness, but a framework for living well even when life is difficult. Not a strategy for avoiding pain, but wisdom for moving through it without being destroyed by it. Not a promise that everything will work out, but a reminder that how it works out matters less than how you meet it. And right now, in this moment, you get to choose how you meet what's here. You can keep chasing happiness like it's something separate from the life you're living. Or you can stop, breathe, and recognize that you're already alive, already here, already experiencing the only existence you're going to get. And maybe, just maybe, that can be enough, not because it's perfect, but because it's real. And real is what you've been missing all along while you were busy pursuing something that never existed in the first place.